Welcome to the Big Dawg Crypto Podcast. This is your number one crypto podcast to hear directly from the movers and shakers, innovators, and disruptors in the cryptocurrency industry. Follow on Twitter for updates and to communicate directly at Woof Big Dawg. That's at Woof Big DAWG. Now, here is your host, the one and only Big Dawg Crypto.
And welcome to the latest episode of the Big Dawg Crypto Podcast. I am your host, Big Dawg Crypto. Posty, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Doing good. Now, before I said, was it Posty or Posty XPT? Because I see that coming across my Twitter feed. And how do you describe that? The name you came up with in your Twitter account?
To be honest, the original name on the account was actually Crypt Malone, and some of the OGs out there might remember that. But yeah, it was a little bit of a rebrand later on, but it all come around like Post Malone. He was my favorite artist at the time, still is one of my favorite artists. And I seen so many different accounts, just dogs and cats and musicians and so much random stuff going on that I thought, well, this definitely doesn't seem like it'll be out of place.
Nice. Well, man, I followed you on Twitter for a while, crypto Twitter as we call it, and I've really enjoyed your account. So I appreciate you being on the 35th episode. This is a big deal to finally have you on.
Thanks for having me. I was just going to say that I actually really appreciate you having me on here, and it's been a long time coming.
Well, I appreciate it, brother. Well, let's get right into it. So, talk about a week to have you on, man. My dad called me. He goes, son, I saw crypto. I went bankrupt. I'm like, Dad, crypto didn't go bankrupt. The exchange did. And then, and I feel like even in the space of a while, and I have too, nothing really should surprise us anymore. Now you see Sam is get an award or speaking at an event. What in the hell is going on? What the hell is that? Like, I don't get it.
There's many theories out there, and some people will call them conspiracy theories, but I really don't think they're doing a very good job of hiding it at this point. It's unbelievable to me that this guy isn't, at least in handcuffs at this point. And it just speaks volumes about the power within the family. I just don't understand how he's getting away with this stuff.
You know what? You're right. It does. And I'm one of those, I'm not always, you sit around with your friends sometimes and they got the different, conspiracy theories. I'm not always about that, but all I know is that Bernie Madoff was, in cuffs after a couple of weeks. Sam's going to be having, champagne. And then there was something about there might be some billions coming to FTX, but, there's a whole bunch there. I guess the bigger question, because we could joke about this and whatnot. And of course, never fun or cool when people lost money. I don't mean that. I mean, we could joke about the absurdity, right, of what's happened. The bigger question, bigger concern is you've been in the space, you've watched it mature. How much do you feel this has set it back? Or in a second part to that question is what will it take to get things where, you know what I'm saying? Like this debacle, as bad as it's been, can go forward. We can start growing again.
I think for me personally, maybe I'm being a little bit optimistic here, but the way I see the situation in a lot of respects is there is a lot of short-term pain here, but then potentially a lot of long-term game. And I hope it works out that way. And the reason I say that is because since this has unfolded, we've seen, people like CZ over at Binance talk about transparency and actually sharing a lot more data than what they probably ever would have unless an event like this actually occurred. So I'm hoping that in the long term, a lot of good does come from this. It seems like we're heading that way, although obviously whilst, emotions are raw and people are upset, people have lost money, they may not see it exactly like that at this point, but hopefully, 3, 6, 12 months, we can look back at this and be like, you know what, as shit as it was at the time, we're moving forward now eventually.
So to add to that, when you look at institutions and then putting big money into the space, I feel like a lot of people in the space, on one hand, we don't want that to happen. On the flip side, people want to see 100,000, 200,000 Bitcoin, right? And that's not going to happen until you have institutional money. What do you think? And to me, that's one of the, whether it's right or wrong, like it is what it is, right? They're not going to put in tons of money unless they have some sort of regulation. And to what extent regulation, we don't know exactly. But what do you think? If you're an institution, right, if you're looking at it, what do you think they want to see at this point, like in a minimum?
And again, when we come back to conspiracy theories, it makes you wonder how many of these guys knew that something like this was on the cards or going to happen in the near future. But I think, to be honest, like this is a huge push for regulation. It's given them a lot of ammunition here to work with. It's a shame because we've always talked about like, not your keys, not your coins and hardware wallets and, you being your own bank. But the more we see stuff like this, the more pessimistic I actually become of us being able to somewhat fill out Satoshi's vision, right? It's becoming less and less likely. But, there's an argument there that as the space matures, as institutions and bigger players get involved, this was likely going to be inevitable.
See, and that's kind of honestly what concerns me because I think everybody in this space, we look at the whole point of, you know, having control over your funds, being able to send it, everything being transparent and the independence from the financial system. And it's kind of like that, I don't say love hate thing, but on one hand, we don't want that control. On the flip side, people look at prices of their coins, right? At the end of the day, they want to see price go up. And
Yep.
I told somebody that I said, let's just say there was three more things like this, right? If Bitcoin went to 5 or 10 or whatever, you know, I see institutions jumping in and buying. I mean, it seems like through these events and as we grow, we're getting to a point where institutions are going to wind up owning a lot of the Bitcoin, which was not the original intended purpose. But they don't like the idea of the small person, right? Of the person sitting, in their room creating something huge. I mean, they're going to want to have their paws on more of that. So it just seems like this almost, I don't say plays into the narrative, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like we're getting in that direction where they're getting many opportunities to accumulate cheap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this kind of relates to what people have said in terms of like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity in terms of like making wealth, generational wealth. And the reason for that is because it was only going to be a matter of time before the big players and the institutions started to get involved. And, we're starting to see that creep in now. And, obviously not everybody's fortunate enough to say that, they jumped in 2011, 2013. But, we've had, for myself anyway, and probably yourself as well, we've had a decent opportunity to make something of this. And I don't think it means that this completely goes away. Crypto dies, nothing like that. That is not what I'm getting at in terms of this huge opportunity disappearing as such, but it is going to start to slow down. The market's going to mature, and then them life changing cycles as such are going to eventually become less and less.
Well, it's interesting you say that because that kind of leads me into the next question. And I told you, like I said, before we talked, I said, look, I really, as I'm grateful everybody listens to the podcast. I said, but especially people that are new in the markets that are trying to learn about stuff. I always want to try and give them some advice or suggestions, right? I mean, not financial advice, but you know what I'm saying? Like just some ideas that maybe that
Yeah.
people didn't give us back in the day. And, on your Twitter, you have an article at the top, which is excellent, that talks about how to thrive during the bear market. You've got 5 tips for your own experiences, right? Back in 2018.
Yep.
So I guess I'd ask, could you kind of summarize that article or give some points of that article that will help? Because there are, like I said, there's a fair amount of new people listening to this and watching this. And, what would you suggest to them that, look, they've only been in a few months. All they've seen is bear. And maybe they bought right last November and they're down 90% of their alts or whatnot. What would you suggest to them?
Yeah, I think for me, because I actually joined the space in early 2018. So when people were offloading their altcoin bags after Bitcoin topped in December, I was the guy buying them bags. Yeah. Not with much capital. I must admit, like, I started very small. I was very, very cautious about the space, which actually worked out in my favor out of complete coincidence, just because of where we was in a cycle, without me even realizing it. So I think this is a very relatable article for me, just because it was at a very similar stage last time around, where I actually started my journey. So I just kind of looked back and evaluated like what I could have done better, what went wrong, and then took a few of them lessons and just to try to make it into an easy to read, condensed article. And some of the points in there I'm still even using obviously now today in this cycle, and that's a big part of like why I want people to learn from my mistakes rather than from their own.
And that's great, man. I mean, that's great because I feel like in this space when I was back in 17 and 18 and,
Yeah.
you didn't really know where to go for the right, I don't want to say advice, but suggestions. And I feel like there's so much crap out there, but there's so many good, like I've said, I liked your account. I mean, your account has been awesome. And there's a few like you that I will follow that have been really, really good, but there's a lot of crap out there. So if people are in the space and they're new, what would you advise them, whether it's Twitter, YouTube, whatever, maybe what would you say is the best way or some good ways, right, for new people to learn about the space and particularly, what could and couldn't happen type thing going forward?
Yeah, I think what makes this so difficult is because there is no right or wrong in a lot of situations here in crypto. There's no right way to buy, there's no wrong way to sell. Whether you're a trader, you're an investor, I think that's the first thing everybody has to figure out. Are they actually here to scalp, to day trade, to swing trade, to invest long term? It doesn't have to be just one as well, of course, but you've got to figure out at least like what's your strategy. And then when it comes to content, learning, educating, there's always a few resources that I push people towards depending on what they're looking for. Um, but a lot of it is just figuring it out. I mean, personally, for myself, I always use Twitter, and then more recently found myself in YouTube. But I'm talking just as one kind of example. When I was learning technical analysis myself, Crypto Cred, amazing resource there for people to actually learn and get moving on their journey in trading. So, it's very, very difficult, especially now because there's so much money involved in the marketing side of things that a lot of people are actually just taking advantage of that. And we've seen them huge engagement tweets and the ridiculous price targets more often in the bull market than the bear market. But you've really just got to, quickly adapt to the situation and learn to cut out the noise.
I agree with you on that. And speaking of, we talk about Twitter and stuff, and I always ask my guests at the end of the program to give your Twitter handle, whatnot. So I'm going to do something I've never done before and give it out now. Look at one of your tweets. And I'm like, so I'm asking for the end too, but at POSTY Follow this man on Twitter. But you have something about connections made through crypto and specifically this app are pretty surreal. And I got to tell you, it's interesting because last October, I've been fortunate, like a lot of people in crypto, to get behind the computer, behind the phone, and meet people, whether it was at Bitcoin in Miami or up in Toronto or whatnot.
Yep.
And I'm from the States. Dubai was an area that I've heard of. I don't know anything about it. Last October, after being a dog on Twitter, next thing you know, I'm sitting, in front of Dubai. So I went up there, stayed at the Creek Harbor area, and it was interesting because I didn't realize this, and I guess I want to ask you specifically about your opinion of Dubai. It was very interesting because I'm there. Next thing you know, like market makers there, and then like from some of the exchanges, meeting with them, and then going to the conference, and some after parties and stuff. And it was just amazing how many crypto people are in Dubai. So I loved it. It's one of my favorite cities. I've told anybody, if you've never been to Dubai, go have a blast. You'll love it. You're in Dubai, right? Is that, if I'm correct? Tell me your thoughts on it.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the main reasons why I'm actually here right now. So I've been here for 3 weeks. I've got another 3 weeks. I'll head home to the UK for Christmas, the holidays, and then I'll probably come back early next year. The other part of that is to get away from the awful British weather during the winter. There's no denying that. But, a huge part, like you said, is just the network, especially obviously in the crypto industry over here. I actually come over originally last year for Crypto Fight Night, met up with so many people on the space, so many people that I've actually been communicating with on Twitter for so long and actually been able to put a face to a name. Yeah. And not just from that perspective, like you said, speaking to exchanges, market makers, all these different people that you didn't actually know exist. And you actually, expand that network so much just being here, just putting yourself in the right circles, just putting yourself out there, really. You don't have to have a following to be involved in these conversations. There was tickets on sale for the public to the Crypto Fight Night. You never know where that one conversation could lead you. But I actually just come back from a call, probably about an hour, probably 1 hour, 30 minutes ago, from somebody who I actually met a couple of weeks back, and we said we'd catch up and get a coffee. So,
and it's cool. And I think it's interesting because the app has enabled people to meet up in real time quickly and stuff. And it's just cool. And so, and it's always interesting when you meet people for crypto Twitter in real life, because you have that kind of like that bond to be able to talk about crypto stuff. Unlike, as I always say, most people in our lives, right? 95% of people don't follow crypto like people in crypto do. So it's an interesting sort of way to be able to do that. But let me ask you this now. How did you originally get into crypto? And do you remember the first time you ever heard of Bitcoin, what you were doing and where you were?
Yeah, so I think the very first time, that I heard of Bitcoin, I was still in school, which was, in college. And that was probably around 2013, but it was nothing more than, some scam online that people use to buy drugs and other stuff like that. So it was completely dismissed until around 4 years later. It come back on the radar early 2017. Still really skeptical. I'm traditionally, like, from like a young age, very careful with money. Now I'm probably more on the degenerate side now, after a little bit of time in crypto. Um, but and then I kind of dismissed it for a long time, and I was like, no, I'm going to look at stocks because stocks are safer, and stocks, isn't this big Ponzi scheme. And I probably studied a lot of YouTube material on the stock market for around 6 months. And then eventually at Christmas time of 2017, going into the new year, I was like, okay, one of the quote unquote New Year's resolutions is going to be to actually get my feet wet in crypto. Of course, that was a terrible call, and it didn't result in me making any money for a very long time. But in a lot of ways, I don't regret that because it helped me learn. It grounded me. I could have very easily just walked away and continued to call it a scam, but I doubled down. Was spending every bus ride to work, reading, listening to podcasts, just to educate myself on the space. And when you're trying to learn about so many different things at first, whether it be price action trading, whether it be mining, there's so many different areas of crypto that it was just a minefield. And eventually, after around 6 months of just continuous learning, I actually started to think, okay, this is all starting to click. It's all starting to make sense, even though for such a long time it felt like it was never gonna sit right with me.
Well, when you look at where the industry is now, right, the whole space is now, and I feel like I guess it was last falls where you really had, you know, you had a lot of family and friends that would never ask about crypto. They did a little bit before, but it was all over the news. Right now, it's, oh my gosh, it's a scam, it's dying, all this stuff. Where would you want to see, and this is kind of a general question, right? But 3 to 5 years, what would you like to see in the industry? What's one or two things that would be like, it would be cool if this finally happened?
Price to be much higher, that's for sure. um,
Yeah.
but no, I think one of the, especially now after what's happened over the last couple of weeks, one of the main things is for us to actually be able to look back at this whole FTX situation and it just be, a blip,
Okay.
and just a small bump in the road, and we'll be able to actually like look back and see it as like I guess the nearest thing to me that I can think of, even though I wasn't around then from doing, a bit of research, was like the whole Mt. Gox situation. I'd like to think that, we can just look back at it and be like, okay, that was a really tough learning curve for many people, but, it helped us move forward. And like I said earlier, it was a lot of short-term pain, but in the long term, we benefit from that and we see a lot more transparency come. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we don't see something like that happen again.
I mean, let's absolutely hope not. What about this thought for raising money? Let's say he's got the sex tape, but you pay $1 not to see it. He raises money that way to relaunch FTX. Would you be okay with that?
I think for the sake of our own eyes, I'm going to have to say, yeah, like it's just going to have to happen. I hope nobody uses FTX.
No,
Yeah, we can't see that stuff, man. That's
no,
that's the worst of the worst.
and this is the problem. Look, in all seriousness, let's just say somebody,
Yeah.
right, gives him a few billion to restart it. I'm not going to put a nickel on FTX. Hell no. Like, I can't imagine.
Is anybody?
No.
Is anybody? Like,
Well, look, we know the space. I'm sure somebody out there will put some money on. I mean, I just no, but overall is the trust that he screwed up with people. It's just like it's been, and we've seen a lot of stuff in this space bad. I put this as one of the top bad events. I mean, I can't think of almost at this point anything worse. We talk about Mount Gox, but that was years ago, and most people aren't familiar with that in the space now. I mean, this thing had, if your grandmother was sitting in Iowa on the TV, all she saw was crypto's bankrupt. Like,
Yeah.
it just sucks. But I don't know. I guess
I mean, the only way I can personally see Sam getting not a second chance, but reviving himself in crypto is either going to be working behind the scenes and putting somebody else's face to an exchange or some kind of project venture, whatever he ends up doing, or just, all of a sudden you see this exchange blow up, or maybe a decentralized exchange of some sort, I don't know, with an anonymous founder. And all of a sudden it's Sam, that's the only ways I can possibly think of him, getting a lifeline in the space. Apart from that, there's absolutely no chance that anybody would put, like you said, a single penny into an exchange of his, never mind FTX.
Yeah, no, there's no, I agree with you on that. So one other thing on with crypto, with alt season, people always like to ask when alt season, and we have our main alt seasons, right? We look at into 2017 or whatnot, and the ones that have been smaller ones. Do you want, and of course, I think a lot of people felt like this November, right? Things were gearing up pretty good, and then boom, the FTX,
Yeah.
right? Do you want to, well, I'll say one thing too. I'm a little surprised that Bitcoin has stayed, like right now it's at 16.5. And, damn well, a few years ago, this would have sent it like down 80%. It was at about 21. The fact that after all this BS in the past 2 weeks, it's only down 16.5, I think it's been it says a lot about, people holding, right? Or people buying.
Yep.
Do you want to guess when next alt season or at any time frame?
It's really funny because the actual phrase itself, alt season, is something that I actually kind of forgot about over these last couple of months. I've seen a lot of talk of bear market rallies,
Right.
essentially the same thing, I guess. But yeah, alt season, probably something I've not heard too much about in 2022. But the way I see it now is obviously we've got that correlation between like if Bitcoin pumps, then it also drags the altcoins with it. And we've seen a lot of that throughout the year. And we've also seen that obviously correlate to stocks and the S&P 500 as well, CPI data, all this kind of stuff that, even for myself is relatively new to me, because back in 2018, we wasn't looking at inflation. We wasn't looking at FOMC, all this kind of stuff that we actually take into consideration now, just wasn't even on the radar for me personally, at least. So, it's definitely a completely different space, but I do feel like, we could, now that Bitcoin, at least for the time being, the news around FTX is settled down, things are starting to stabilize again. I think that we could see, a decent rally over these next couple of months, to be honest. Not to say that the bear market is over. I personally think that this is, especially for 2023, there's going to be a lot of pain, but not necessarily just going down, but a lot of sideways action. That's just going to bore people to hell, and people are going to need to, as the macro environment gets worse and worse, I feel like people are going to need that spare cash, need that money to pay bills, to pay mortgages, whatever it may be. And that spare cash is sat in crypto, which is stable and doing nothing. So I'm wary of that scenario as well. But not to say that we won't get the rallies from time to time and there won't be opportunities to make money. I think the thing for me, at least personally, is that when these opportunities do come, I'll be playing level to level and I'll be making sure that I'm taking profit on a regular basis.
That is the worry. And that is the way that I think, a lot of people don't think about that. And, times can be bear markets and suddenly they go bull and then, people will forget. So that's always the best thing. Like,
Yeah.
I'll remind them, let them know whatnot. But yeah, I can agree with you on that. Well, looking at the markets now, I mean, it's going to be an interesting year coming up. That's for sure. Any predictions for 2023? Let's say Bitcoin. I always like to ask price prediction. You and I both know it's such a speculative, right? But it's always fun to kind of, make the prediction. And any thought what we could see in 2023?
I'll stick to what I just said in terms of a lot of sideways price action. If I'm being, a little bit boring, a little bit pessimistic, I do think that, we could see this range continue. I think we could pump still. I think, we could go as high as maybe like 30K throughout the year at some point. But I really don't see us going much higher than that until 2024. See.
Of course, then you got the halving coming up. No, I think you'd be very realistic on that. It's just, it's good to see it stay in this range, at least, and not go lower, at least for that. Okay, well, brother, look, a couple other things, and we'll wrap this up. I know you got other stuff to do too. What's your favorite food when you're going out to eat? What do you like to eat?
I'm a big fan of Indian food myself. Yeah, don't have it too often because it's not the best in terms of health, but I do love a good Indian.
Okay, and countries. If you got a plane right now, you're jumping on, you're going on vacation. What's a place or two that you go to in a heartbeat?
I mean, I'm already in one of them, so I can't complain too much.
Yeah.
But no, I really do.
Yeah.
What was that? Sorry.
No, what would you say? Like, what's a country? Like, what's one of your favorite countries to go to?
I mean, I've not actually been to this one, but I really want to go to the Maldives just to have a chill out and really relax and maybe put the phone down for a solid week. That'd be really nice. But for me, the Caribbean, going over to some of them islands is one of the best places that I've been to.
Nice. Okay. And so people want to reach out to you on Twitter. How do they find you? And what is the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so on Twitter, as you said earlier, it's PostyXBT, POSTYXBT. The DMs are open. I'm more than happy to chat with people. I've been trying to help as many people as well throughout this whole FTX scenario. So if you're feeling down, if you need any help, I'm more than happy to do what I can. But please don't ask me for money. That's not how this thing works. But yeah, as well on Telegram, same handle. So I'm more than happy for people to reach out there.
Hey, Posty, I appreciate you coming on the latest episode of the Big Dog Crypto Podcast. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Big Dog Crypto Podcast. Follow on Twitter at WoofBigDawg. Woof, big DAWG. And run faster than the competition. Woof, woof.